one of the things that kind of became part of the conversation of plein air painting just recently, and it's been around and I've heard it, and I've done some research in it, some artists use it, is this whole concept of Notan drawings. Notans are black and white Japanese drawings, kind of what they use to do interesting compositions with. And I had spent some time studying them. Notan is N-O-T-A-N, it's Japanese. With my research, I realized that a true Notan, this is what a Notan is in its purest form. This is a Notan. Okay. And Notans basically are a cutout. So you would have the exact same object cut out and placed on the opposite side. So oftentimes what the Japanese would do is that they would cut out a tree and then put that cutout opposite the other way, okay? And then they would have the tree as a line drawing, and then where they cut the tree out would be like a reflection. And so the Notans have a way of almost like mirroring. And if you do really study the Notan Japanese philosophy, they're usually like this. It's usually a mirror image, patterns against patterns itself. Artists have started using Notans for their compositions to see how darks and lights work together, and they do have value in putting together a composition. But since we're such in a limited time, what's more valuable in the conversation than Notans as a beginning student is doing value studies, and we'll be talking about that in the next couple of days. So I felt like Notans were just a little something that maybe we would look at in the second course, in the plein air course. Then all of a sudden at 4 o'clock, or 2 o'clock in the morning, all of a sudden I thought, brilliant. I should actually be an art teacher. So I thought, you know, one of the things that is really important as a plein air painter, probably the biggest pet peeve that I see in a lot of paintings that are done out on location, a lot of my students suffer from this problem. It's a problem I deal with every class period that I have, and that is what we call in class bird holes. Okay? The holes that are in trees that birds fly through. So most of them call them sky holes, but I like to call them bird holes because I can imagine birds just flying through. But it's the holes that are in trees. Those holes are very crucial to plein air painters. One reason why is because a lot of plein air painters actually paint the trees first and then paint the sky. And it's very common for beginner painters to actually paint the sky in and then put the trees on top. So with Rob Ross, you have, you know, him put in a pretty little sky, and then he takes his fan brush and goes, and he gets this kind of fan brush effect that from a tree that I have never seen. You know, it's like maybe at Christmas time. Huh? It's a happy tree. It sits in front of a happy cloud, next to a happy mountain and a brook. Yeah, well, that's just it. And you know, the whole thing about plein air painting is that you are trying to practice your eye to see what's there. And plein air painters, if they were to work with value studies, they work in mass, and part of the things that we will be talking about probably tomorrow is chunking in with values. And a lot of paintings that you see are done on location. They're done in 4 chunks of value. If we said like white, gray, darker, and black, you'd have 4 chunks, and these chunks are big areas that put together the composition. And if we follow that line, we would actually call a mass of trees a chunk. And you would paint that mass of trees as one big space instead of individual trees on their own. So what plein air painters do is they paint that chunk in, and then at some time they start cutting into that chunk with sky, putting in bird holes or sky holes in between the trees. And there are philosophies, and I want to kind of actually try it with you guys to kind of practice your eye. And when I started thinking about the whole Notan thing, it's all of a sudden, it dawned on me that this basically is what we have to form trees. Okay, we actually are looking at negative and positive shapes. This here is a true Notan. It's where the tree is cut out. You see all the branches in here, and then it was cut out of this, I think it's a piece of metal, but what was cut out here is actually the positive up here, and then the negative. That would be a Notan. But it's this idea of having positive and negative shapes. This is plein air painting in its rawest form. You actually will be painting large shapes and then going in and painting skies in between these shapes to form trees and branches. How you do this will either make or break the painting, and it requires a bit of knowledge and skill and lots of practice. When I see students putting it into their paintings, I'm like going, because they'll end up looking like balloons stuck on a tree. You know, round little shapes, and they're disconnected. And so you have to kind of imagine where the trunk would be in this mass. So if we ended up with one large mass of trees, we'd have to think about where the trunk would be. We'd have to think about where the branches would go out. We'd have to think about how branches cross each other. And so we'd have to paint all of these separate sections in here so that we could actually get the look of a tree. And you have to kind of think consistent, because if a trunk starts at the base down here, as the trunk goes into this mass, it's still there, and you can't put a bird hole in the middle of where the trunk would be. So you have to train your eye to see that. You have to train your eye to cut into a tree to form the kind of tree that it is. And Chris, last couple of weeks, we were dealing with eucalyptus trees. And the shape of their negative shapes, so these Notans, are different than a cypress tree or an oak tree. And so for every tree, this is different. But the knowledge or the practice of it is still very crucial. Then, you know, like I said, this will look very familiar to you. This is actually a plein air painting. And here we're actually looking at mass and then broken in. And you can start seeing that learning how to create this part in a painting, plein air, would be a very crucial tool to have. Now, you could very easily just paint the sky and then put this in, but unfortunately, it doesn't look that good. And one of the rules with putting in these sky holes is that these sky holes have to be darker than the sky itself. And another thing that you have to consider, and we'll see if we can practice it, is that there is color that goes through these sky holes, and within these sky holes, you'll actually see changes of colors and values within the hole itself. So you could see there's very, very complex subtleties. So we're not just plotting holes in trees, we're actually forming shapes and forms that have actually color and value within them. So the next little exercise that we're going to do, we'll work on that. Here's another Notan experiment with trees here, where the sky was painted on top of a mass. So the trees were painted kind of rough and heavy. Now, when we're talking about learning how to speed up your painting, what you would do is you would paint the mass in, put the bird holes in, because it takes less time to actually paint the holes than it does the tree. And then that would speed up your painting process. This is the actual one that we are going to play with today. Something like this. And you see this is very You can see it's very similar to probably what you would think a plein air painting would look like. Here would be another example of that. And here's even a more complex version of the sky holes being painted around a flat surface. Intrigued? Makes sense?
Yeah.
Yes?
It still looks easier to me to paint the sky and put trees on top.
It does.
Holes.
But art over a long period of time, artists have been painting. They have determined that the trees look better if the holes are painted on top. Otherwise, they kind of look cookie cutterish. So anyway, what we are going to do is we're going to do this. And the reason why I thought this was such a good idea is that I ended up getting a whole bunch of these panel boards that come from backs of frames, pre-bought frames. And a framer down in Reading constantly gives me these, and I go, thanks, but I don't know what I'm going to do with them. And all of a sudden this morning I started cutting them up going, I know what we're going to do with them. So I'm going to hand these out to you guys. I'm going to take one for myself. Now, some of them have labels on them, and you can just go ahead and just peel the label off. This is just an exercise, and you can just choose one of those. They're kind of dusty because they were in my garage this morning. So what we are going to do is we're going to do this in a couple of stages here. And this is just for an experiment. Now, how many of you that are in my classes find that doing bird holes is kind of challenging? Okay, so you don't even know what bird holes are. You've never painted like this in reverse. So what we're going to assume that this black panel is our tree. Okay? So this is the tree. So we're going to turn this into a Notan. And we're going to be doing that, and this is what we're going to do, is that we're going to take white paint and we're going to start cutting into this shape to make the base of the tree. And we're going to start off on the outside and we're going to form the outside of the tree. Okay? If we were painting outdoors, we would actually be painting this as a mass. Okay. Now,
you have to assume the black is.
Yeah, so what we've done is we've already painted the tree in. Now, some of the artists have said that they would be really excited if they could paint faster. And so if they could paint a tree like this in the beginning stages, they could actually see the mass and see how that tree would fit in there without worrying about all the branches and all the holes and stuff. And they can start thinking about the next mass and the next mass. The one reason why you want to work this way is you start chunking the composition in quickly, because if you fix the composition within 30 seconds instead of an hour and a half, you've improved your painting speed. So the whole idea behind chunking in a composition is to be able to get the effect in quickly and then stand back and judge to see if it's working. So, and I've never painted on the back of these black boards, so we will see how that goes too. No, I could probably put it right here on the. No, you're going to try to follow me. Okay, and normally when you are painting values, and we'll talk about this tomorrow, and especially when we go outdoors, is that normally a successful painting has fewer value changes, 4 or 5. And so like the sky would be a chunk of value, kind of an area that's all about the same value. The mountains are all about the same value. That would be a second chunk. A third chunk would actually be the trees, and a fourth chunk would actually be the ground. So depending on the angle that objects are to the sun, verticals are darker, angles are lighter, flat planes are lighter, depending how those become value chunks. how you arrange those chunks are the beginning of putting together a composition. So what we have done here is that we've already laid in a chunk, and now what we're going to do is that and again, this is just practice, so don't worry about if it's going to be good, because at the end of today, I will collect them and toss them. Okay? Don't have any attachment to these. The boards are $30 a piece if you wish to take them home. I tried. No, you can keep these, but I don't want you to have it. I expect this to fail. Okay? But I expect you to leave here with the knowledge of how to do it. That's the main thing. So what we're going to do is we're going to do a relatively quick shape here, that we'd call the outside of the tree. Okay? So go ahead and do something like that. And once that's done, go in with your white paint and paint the sky. This would be a way that you would be painting outdoors, believe it or not. You would start off with basic values, massive shapes. If you design a painting and you're worried about all the branches and twigs and stuff ahead of time, you're not going to be able to see the overall mass. Although Chris has never done this either herself, but she is actually the inspiration for this. Bird holes. I remember last week she says, I'm not very good at bird holes. I'm like going, okay, after 10 years we have to address the bird hole issue. The bird hole is... Like I said, we weren't going to do this today, but I think it's crucial before we go out. Because one thing that you will discover when we go out to paint outdoors is that all these trees have bird holes in them.